This is a 361 degrees Futura, and if you only have 10 seconds to spare, let me sum it up in one sentence. It's a daily trainer, but for the trails. If you want to hear more, let's get into it. Guys, 361 degrees was good enough to send me a pair of these Futura for the purpose of review. However, they are not going to get a chance to see this video before you do here on YouTube. Okay, first things first, let's get started with price. The 361 degree Futura will cost you $150. Let's drop a few specs. Now, these specs have been quite difficult to come by, and if I'm totally honest, I don't actually know what these specs are. 361 degrees doesn't make it any easier, and at the time of me making this review, there haven't been many reviews of this shoe, so I can't go to other people's reviews and check that the numbers that I get are the same as what they get. So in order to get the stack height, I did have to go to the 361 degrees European site. And on their product page for the Futura, they say we have 30mm in the heel, 24 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. Now I live in the United States, and when I go to the 361 degrees US page, they don't provide any stack heights. But they say that it has a 5mm drop. So the UK is reporting 6mm, the US is reporting 5mm. Which is it? I don't know. Now, because of this discrepancy in the numbers between Europe and the United States, I also question the stack height. When I put my hand in and kind of feel where the insole is in relation to where this midsole comes up, it doesn't drop down into the midsole. So we're quite a high riding shoe. And just looking at that from the outside, to me, it just seems like it's more than 30mm. In fact, hold on. Okay, can you believe I couldn't find a ruler, but I did find this tailor's tape measure. So I just want to hold this up at the thickest part for you guys to see, and at the thickest part of the heel right here, we are looking at 40mm of just the midsole. Then we add a couple more millimeters for the outsole foam. So, with that said, and assuming that the insole does drop just slightly inside where this midsole comes up to, yeah, I think it does go down just a little bit, but it's not much. I am going to guess that we have 38mm in the heel, and so that means we either have 32 or 33 in the forefoot. In fact, let me just measure this forefoot. Yeah, I don't know, this is a little trickier. This almost looks like it's 28, 29, but this is a totally inaccurate way of measuring the midsole. So please take whatever I say with a pinch of salt. Ultimately, it's going to be somewhere between 30mm and 40mm in the heel, and then 5 or 6mm less in the forefoot. How's that? Now, a lot of times when manufacturers list a weight, they're listing it on a sample size. Oftentimes that sample size is US men's size 9. Of course, that's not always the case, but it is sometimes. I would say most of the time. On the European site, they have the 361 degree Futura listed at 320 grams. And if we do a quick mental calculation, we come up with the 361 degree Futura in Europe weighing 11.3 ounces. But all that means nothing, because really I'm just reading you numbers from a website. What I can tell you is my size, and I wear a US men's size 13. And in my size, the 361 degree Futura tips the scale at 13.3 ounces or 377 grams. Certainly not light, but remember, it is a trail shoe. Trail shoes are often just a little bit heavier than their road counterparts. And if you look at it, if I hold it up, I think this shoe is about as light as it looks. It doesn't look all light and nimble. But that's a good thing, because it's not a speed day shoe. This isn't the shoe that you're going to put on your feet and then go out and run a 5K. Said in the beginning, this is a daily trainer, but a daily trainer made for the trails. In fact, if you were looking for a road option of the 361 degree Futura, you would probably want to pick up a pair of the 361 Centauri. I have reviewed the Centauri in another video, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes below if you're interested. Interestingly enough, the Centauri costs $130 here in the US, and the Futura, remember, $150. Now, a $20 bump between the road shoe and the trail shoe seems a little high, but if you are running on any trails, you are not going to want to take out the Centauri. It's got a fairly slick bottom, and you're probably not going to get too much grip in the Centauri if you're running on trails with any kind of variability. We'll get to the outsole on the Futura in just a second. But let's start at the top. Let's work our way down. I'm going to hold this up. We got a nice padded heel collar right here. Like, it's plush, isn't it? Now, when I put my foot into the shoe, it feels nice. It feels like I'm putting my foot into like a nice pair of Uggs, you know? It's just a lot of padding that wraps around my foot. The heel counter is fairly rigid, good enough to give me a good lockdown. Got a little heel pull here on the back, something that I never use. But overall, the story of this upper is plush. We have just a lot of padding. Now, the upper is a knit upper. It's made with 40% recycled yarn, so that's always a good thing. And this upper, even though it's a knit upper, I tend to think knit uppers run a little warm. The upper on the Futura is actually fairly breathable, and it's quite light. If I'm like manipulating it right here, it doesn't feel super thick. Now, it's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky for me testing a shoe in summertime in Florida just because it's so hot here. But the shoe didn't actually ride really hot on my feet. Now, of course, I soaked this thing through every time I went out for a run, and that's mainly a product of the sweat running down from my body and then being soaked choked up by all this padding, but as far as the front of my foot goes, felt pretty comfortable. Can't really say anything negative about the upper and how it felt here in the toe box. And while we're talking about the toe box, if I hold it up, see it's fairly wide. I did have plenty of room for my toes to kind of splay out, just an overall feeling of comfort. And if I turn it so you can see, we do have a little bit of sole flare right here, which is going to give us a nice wider solid base. So when you're running on the trails and things get a little sketchy, hopefully the Futura are going to keep you on even ground, you know what I mean? The laces worked phenomenally. I never had an issue with them coming undone. They're nice, they're a nice length. Yeah, no complaints on the laces. We have a lace loop in the middle and we do have a gusseted tongue. Now the tongue I especially like on this shoe. I also like it on the Centauri, and they're using the same tongue. It's their pressure-free tongue. And basically it is very similar to a race day tongue in its thickness, which is a little surprising because it goes against everything else we're seeing here. There's so much padding and then you get to the tongue and there's not really much padding at all. Now there is some padding that's strategically placed to prevent the laces from biting into the top of your foot, but the tongue by name is the pressure-free tongue and it works. I never had any problem with the tongue and it moving around, obviously with a lace loop and a gusset. It's not going to move around, but I didn't have any trouble with the laces being too tight when they lock down on the top of my foot. The Futura does have minimal overlays. We've got some branding here, maybe some slight overlays and underlays on the front just to keep that material off your foot, and then just a little bit coming around the back. It's really not much at all. But if I hold it up and you look right here, you see these yellow loops right here along the eyelet chain. These yellow loops actually come all the way down and they attach here right at the bottom of the upper. Now this is their more fit lacing system, and ultimately it's these little things, their more fit lacing system, that is going to give you the good lockdown across your midfoot. So when you cinch your laces down, you're actually pulling tension right up from the bottom of the upper right here, so it just gives a good fit right around your foot. It works. Okay, coming down to the midsole. 361 Degrees is using their Engage midsole, the same midsole foam that's on the Centauri. Now 361 Degrees Engage midsole is a TPE foam, and if you look really closely, you're not going to see it here, but I'll overlay something. You can see it is a beaded foam. And I'm actually really happy with how this foam has been performing. It's certainly soft, but not too soft. Provides a lot of protection, and the responsiveness is okay. I mean, it's exactly what I want from a daily trainer. Now, in case any of you are wondering, this is a non-plated shoe. It's pretty flexible, but I don't think that almost, lack of flexibility is anything to do with the midsole foam. It's going to be more a product of this outsole. And the outsole is Vibram Mega Grip. See a nice solid placement of Vibram right here. Now 361 Degrees didn't mess around when they put this Vibram Mega Grip outsole on the outsole of the Futura. I guess they could have done some cutouts, maybe a midsole groove, which may have increased flexibility, but they didn't. They plastered the entire bottom of the shoe in Vibram Mega Grip. Now, while as a layperson I would question if all this outsole is absolutely necessary, maybe we could have little cutouts just to reduce the weight a little. There are obvious benefits from having full coverage. We've got a lot more ground contact area, so the shoe's going to be a little more stable. Gives us a lot more area to add these lugs. We can see these chevron lugs right here in the middle, and then little square or parallelogram lugs kind of coming around the outside. Now the Vibram Mega Grip is, the gold standard in outsoles for trail shoes. It really does provide phenomenal grip. And in my testing, I didn't have any issues with it. I have tested a lot of shoes with the Vibram Mega Grip outsole, and they do work well on the trails. I haven't had a chance to test it in really muddy conditions just because I wondered, does Florida even have mud? I don't know, there's got to be some mud somewhere, but a lot of the ground that I'm running on is kind of small rocks, maybe sand. I don't find myself running through a lot of mud on a daily basis. But on the trails that I took these on, these relatively easy trails, definitely non-technical, I found this Vibram Mega Grip outsole gripped very well, and I didn't have any issues. And my experience with this shoe and with this outsole and the type of trails that I was running on, I think is exactly the type of trails that this shoe is going to be designed for. You know that I think this is a daily trainer made for the trails, and because it's a daily trainer, it's not going to be specific for anything too crazy. You're not going to go rock hopping in this shoe. Probably not the best shoe to choose if you're going to be running across a scree field, scrambling I should say. But if you do what most of us do when we go trail running, we're running on maybe groomed trails, something that isn't too technical, this shoe is going to work well for you. There is no rock plate in the Futura, but again, I don't really think it's necessary. One, I don't think it's necessary because we have this full coverage of the Vibram Mega Grip, but also this shoe is not made for the type of trails where you're going to need a rock plate, so I really don't think it matters. But just in case you do go on some trails where you want a little rock protection, I think this outsole and the Engage midsole is going to give you enough protection to get by. So I think daily trainers are a difficult thing to really talk about because I think there's something that we all need. They are the shoes that we put most of our miles in, and if you live somewhere where you do a lot of trail running, then these are definitely a consideration. Oh, I should mention road running. Now look, I am not going to take this shoe out on a run where I'm just running on the road, but from where I live there is no way for me to get to trails trails unless I drive or I run from the house on roads in order to get to the trails. So on several of my runs, I did take these shoes out and I had to run a couple of miles on the road before I actually got to the trails. It performs pretty good on road. Now, it is a little firm, but it's definitely doable. It's not uncomfortable. It's definitely not soft like, let's say, the Hoka Challenger 7, but then the Hoka Challenger 7 has a much softer compound on the bottom. It's more of a road to trail option. This is definitely a trail option that you could run on the road in the times that you have to. Does that make sense? Now, how am I going to use this shoe moving forward? Well, yeah, it's going to be my easy runs. It's going to be my easy runs when I go out on the trails. Like this morning, before I sat down to make this review, I went out and I did 10 miles on the trails. Just nice and easy pace. There was some ups and downs, and it was a lovely morning. My body felt good when I was finished. The shoe gave me a lot of protection. I didn't feel beat up, which is exactly what I want from a daily trainer. Oh, I should just mention fit. Now, as I've already said, I have had a good heel lockdown. I've got a good midfoot lockdown, and we do have a little bit of room here in the toe box. But even though everything seems to fit in its own individual areas, the whole experience is just, I don't want to say loose, but it's not super tight. Now, I know we don't want super tight, but we want to feel really secure. And when I'm thinking about it, when I'm out on the trails, I guess I'm feeling like it's a cruiser. It's something I want to take out and just cruise with without doing really anything technical. And I know I've already said this isn't a shoe for technical trails, but I'm just thinking of another reason why it probably isn't the best shoe for technical trails. I don't know. It's a hard one to put my finger on what it actually was. But the shoe was giving me a lot of protection. It just didn't feel bespoke. Does that make sense? I don't know. I think I've been rambling enough. All in all, $150, yeah, it's a little on the high end, but the shoe is super comfortable and it's going to last you a long time. And if you run trails on a regular basis and you're looking for something super plush and comfortable, 361 Futura is something to consider. Guys, it's Matt B. This has been my review of 361 Degrees Futura. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.